The referendums in Kurdistan and Catalonia, of course, have more in common than many would imagine. While these two states might be far away, the basic demands of their leaders remain the same. Here's a report.
It's not every day that the Spanish king appears on television with a message, much less with a warning.
For a long time, certain authorities in Catalonia, in a repeated, conscious and deliberate manner, have been breaching the constitution and its autonomy statute, which is the law that recognizes and protects its historic institutions and its self-government. With their decisions, they have systematically broken norms legally approved, showing an inadmissible disloyalty towards the state powers.
King Felipe accused the Catalan leaders of trying to break the unity of his country. On the streets, crowds of protesters continued to swell up. Days after 90% voted in favor of an independence referendum.
It was very good. It is what we need. I think this kind of separatism is ridiculous in the 21st century. I just don't understand it. I think it's stupid. I believe I agree with the king and he will probably agree with me.
It is the message from the king, who represents the highest institution we have in Spain, so it must be respected. I understand everyone has their own personal preferences, so I think people need to open their eyes and hope for the best.
The man leading the movement, Catalan President Carles Puigdemont, has called on members of the European Union to stand up for his cause.
We are
going to declare independence. 48 hours after the results of recount we are doing at present are made official. This would probably end when we get the results from outside Spain at the end of this week. Therefore, we are talking about between this weekend or beginning of the next week.
The response is disappointing for him, but hardly surprising. In a statement issued a day after the referendum, the Commission had said, "Violence can never be an instrument in politics. We trust the leadership of Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy to manage this difficult process in full respect of the Spanish Constitution and of the fundamental rights of citizens enshrined therein." As for Mr. Rajoy, the options are limited and unsavory. He can invoke Article 155 of the Spanish Constitution, which incidentally has never been used in the history of Spain, and which allows the government to step in and take control of an autonomous region if it does not fulfill the obligations imposed upon it by the Constitution or other laws, or acts in a way that is seriously prejudicial to the general interest of Spain. For now, violence and chaos reign supreme in the southern European nation, bringing the city of Barcelona to a standstill. Catalan leaders say their demand for independence is legitimate, but the response from the central government in Madrid is likely to increase tensions and open doors for outside actors to exploit divisions within the country. In faraway Kurdistan, the issues and dynamics are different, but the basic demand is the same: secession, freedom, independence. Take your pick.
Great people of Kurdistan, you did not allow anyone to break your will when you voted yes to independence and no to new Anfal chemical attack and massacre. We entered a new stage, and this is a win for all Kurdistan.
More than 10 days after an overwhelming majority of more than 5 million ethnic Kurds in northern Iraq voted for separation, there is no clarity on their status. Kurdistan is in limbo. The central government in Baghdad has said it will not engage in any negotiations. Neighbors, Iran and Turkey, opposed the referendum from the very beginning. Turkish president has even threatened to cut oil supply to Kurdistan. Iraq's richest hub of oil, one of the country's top money spinners, is struggling economically as the politics takes over. adding to the general chaos and instability in West Asia, still dealing with the aftermath of the Arab Spring and the growing role of Russia and the US in the region. Bureau Report, WION.
Joining us this evening from Barcelona is Elizabeth Castro. She's an American author. Good evening, Elizabeth. What's it like on the ground? Do Catalonians feel let down by their neighbors in Europe?
Good evening. Indeed, they do feel let down, but I want to make sure that people know that there is no chaos here. It's not chaotic at all. In fact, this is a very structured, peaceful, non-violent movement, very much inspired by your own Gandhi. There has been no violence whatsoever on the Catalan side. We have been a completely peaceful democratic movement. And indeed, we were really disappointed, particularly today at the debate in the European Commission and the European Parliament, when they said that, you know, the law is the most important thing and we have to follow Spanish law, except that it seems like they're not willing to recognize that Spain isn't following its own law when it unleashes brutal police force against peaceful people who just want to vote. We were very disappointed in Europe today, indeed.
How do you respond to the argument that Catalonia was happy to be a part of Spain as long as the going was good? After 2007, when you saw an economic downturn and things began to go downhill, the Catalonians wanted to part ways.
Well, that's not precise. In fact, the economic downturn didn't start really until 2009. But the Catalan independence movement has been going for many, many, many years. And in fact, there was chafing between the relationship between Catalonia and Spain as that came to a head in 2000. There were friendly governments in Barcelona and Madrid that came to an agreement about a statute of autonomy. That was it was a hard negotiation, but they did come to an agreement, and that was voted on by the people. They weren't particularly satisfied with it, but they were like, you know, we want to get along with Spain, so we'll go along with it. The ruling PP party brought that to the Constitutional Court, and the Constitutional Court, after 4 years of politicized debate, stripped out some of the most important rulings for Catalans. And that's when Catalans began to mobilize. In 2006, frustrated with this negotiation, they began to come out on the streets en masse, hundreds of thousands of people saying, we want to have a voice. We are allowed to be represented by our government, and you're not listening to us. And so, I mean, this is a shining example of democracy. It's an amazing thing to watch. These are regular people on the street, organizing amongst themselves, electing a parliament that does what the people say that it should do, and then insisting that that parliament complete and fulfill its democratic mandate, which it was to hold a referendum. These are not people who are burning garbage cans. They're not breaking windows. It's completely nonviolent. There is no chaos whatsoever. But instead, they want to be able to vote peacefully. And on Sunday, when they finally were given that chance by their own Catalan government, the Spanish responded earlier in the week by arresting Catalan officials, by confiscating campaign information, by blocking websites. And on Sunday, I mean, you've probably seen the footage. They were stamping on peaceful voters. They were knocking down old women. They were tear gassing people in tiny little towns. They wanted to intimidate people and make them afraid. The only violence and chaos came from the Spanish police, and it is a shame.
And there's a good chance that those scenes might be repeated this weekend with the Catalan leaders saying that they're going to declare independence. What does declaring independence really mean? Overnight, Catalonia is a separate country, even though the world doesn't want to take sides, and the Spanish government, Madrid at least, doesn't recognize you as a separate country. Do you fear more violence? How do you think it's playing out?
Well, you know, the world doesn't need to take sides about Catalan independence. That's something for Catalans to decide on. What the world needs to take sides on is democracy. The world needs to say whether it supports people voting to solve a problem or whether it supports Spanish violent police brutality against peaceful voting citizens. That's what the world really needs to take sides on. It's very important. So the question is whether there will be violence this weekend. Well, you're going to have to ask Spain that, because there's not going to be any violence coming from the Catalan side. And that's what we saw on October 1st. On one side, we saw this horrific scenes of police brutality. And on the other hand, Catalans put their hands up and they sang and they chanted and they said, we want to vote. We just want to vote. This is what democracy is about. And so, I would like it very much if the world took sides about democracy.
We'll We'll, of course, keep track of this story. Elizabeth, appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much for being with us here on Gravitas, and all the very best as Catalonians fight for independence there. Since 1945, we can tell you the world has seen an average of 52 movements for independent statehood every year. Secession movements are on the rise. As of 2011, there have been 55 active secessionist movements around the world. Some got independence, some brought changes, but most of them faded away. Let's take a look at some of the prominent ones one by one. 3 years before Catalonia and Iraq, the people of Scotland voted in September 2014 to split from the United Kingdom. The main issues were economic, involving currency and public expenditure. Those who said no won with 45 to 55% of the vote, and Scotland did not gain independence. In January 2011, now South Sudan fought for freedom from Northern Sudan for sovereignty after clashes for economic gains and political power. The referendum was successful, and South Sudan became its own territory in July 2011. Malta's referendum of February 1956 was aimed at integration with the United Kingdom, where the former would have control over political affairs such as defence and foreign relations. The proposals were approved by more than 77% of voters but never implemented. The country became independent only 8 years later. Another rather controversial referendum was held in October 1945 for Mongolian freedom from China. There was much speculation over the role of the Soviet Union in Mongolia's move for political independence. A sweeping 100% voted yes, causing many to believe that the voting was forced by Mongolia. China recognized independence for Mongolia in 1946. In 1995, a second referendum was called Canada's Quebec, a French-speaking province in that country. The voters were asked whether Quebec should proclaim national sovereignty and become an independent country. More than 50% voted no to remain in Canada, but the difference is very slight, so many calling for another referendum. Experts fear that referendums reflect the rise of separatist movements around the world, and with the recent events in Catalonia and Kurdistan, experts are looking at 3 more states that could demand independence. The region of Biafra in Nigeria has seen renewed agitation in favour of independence, with several sources reporting the rise of a separatist movement. The rise of the new Flemish alliance in the Flanders region of Belgium is being seen as a secessionist movement. Majority of the people living in Flanders are Dutch-speaking, unlike the francophone regions of Brussels and Wallonia. Some say the economic quality in the 3 regions could be fueling demands for a referendum in this region. Ukraine's Donetsk and Luhansk have also raised demands for independence. Many feel these demands have been fueled by Russians. The leaders of these regions want more say on matters of national security and trade policy. So this is not just about Spain and Iraq.